Welcome to The World Today. I'm Waqas Majeed. Today we're talking about three important topics. The first one being the violations on the line of control that are continuing unabated despite the meetings between the national security advisors of India and Pakistan. In fact, the Indians are upping the ante when it comes to violating the line of control. And we'll also talk about the Indian Army's chief's statement regarding calling Pakistan's bluff. That is a very, very irresponsible statement being made by somebody who's the chief of the Indian Army. Very, very irresponsible and uncalled for statement. We'll discuss the parameters of that. Our second topic has to do with our fledgling relationship with the United States. There was an American general, Joseph Vattel. He called up the Chief of Army Staff to clarify some points between the relationship of the US and Pakistan. We'll talk about that as well. There was also a US Senator who called the Chief of Army Staff. We'll discuss what came out of those talks. And finally, we will talk about the progress that has been made or not made in the Zainab case. People are still protesting, and it has been a case that has been blown out of proportion, and it is also something that needs to be looked at very seriously in order to see in which direction our overall society is heading in. Let's get the conversation started. I'd like to introduce my guests in the studio. Joining me today, we have Mr. Javeed Ather Javeed Saab, and along with him, we have Yasir Masood. Thank you very much, sir, for being here. Ather Saab, I'll start with you. First of all, 4 Pakistani army soldiers have lost their lives, sir. And of course, the Pakistani side responded, and 3 of the Indians were also killed as a result. There were several wounded. But then the question remains, sir, that we also keep protesting to the Indian High Commissioner about the constant violations of the line of control, sir. It's getting out of hand day by day, sir. What is your analysis of this situation? Why is the LOC being kept in a sort of heated state?
Thank you very much, Waqas. I think it's the most appropriate question in terms of both diplomatic and why it's not working, and also why Indian aggression is pushing, India wants to push hard to a level where it boils up to other international borders. So my analysis is simply that India is not regarding a state of peace and a peaceful affairs coexistence between Pakistan and India. This India means that the current Indian status is totally belligerent and they are warmongering. It shows because our diplomatic efforts, as you said, we are trying very hard. We called up all the time to Indian High Commission asking them, please do not conduct that kind of violation because it will create a situation in which Pakistan has to respond. And Pakistan responded today, as you said, but the unfortunate is a very unfortunate international situation that the international powers, including the United States, is not really caring about all what's happening in South Asia. This is much more dangerous because disregarding a tense situation between 2 nuclear rivals mean 2 things. Either they are encouraging India to push Pakistan to the level of where Pakistan, loses and retaliates in a very harsh manner, or other way around, that they are testing Pakistan's, borders actually. How Pakistan feels and what kind of discussions are in, what kind of preparatory stage Pakistan is at. So I would say that the Pakistan must continue to respond in kinds at one point. Second, diplomatically, Pakistan needs to, without regarding whatever US says and whatever India says and what is the opinion about us, Pakistan must continue to talk to his friends and foes alike, and clearly telling them that this situation would ultimately result into something unfortunate which may not be controlled later on, because it is at the moment they are testing waters, but they do not know when, because the war cannot be controlled once it's initiated. I mean, the way Indians are operating for the past couple of years means they are mounting civilian casualties in order to create further dissension problems, because this generates bad image on Pakistani side. And on the other hand, attacking directly to the armed forces mean trying to demoralize the fighting force, that all right, you have one front, internal security, other is at western border, now we are at the eastern border. So the multi-pronged strategy combining with sub-conventional warfare and conventional means to deter Pakistan.
Because they've already stated that they're going to try to bleed Pakistan through 1,000 different cuts, and this is how they're going about fulfilling their nefarious designs. But also they need to keep in mind the law of unintended consequences, which I keep
That's
talking
what
about.
I'm saying.
Absolutely,
that would
sir.
exactly happen, and until and unless the international powers realizes it. Because previously, what used to happen is that if the situation gets intense, like in 2002 and other standoffs, the US and other countries would jump in and try to, man or manage India. At the moment, it appears to me it's a reverse course. They are encouraging India to push Pakistan, and at the same time, they are putting their demands on the table and trying to twist our arms. So this is kind of a very, I would say, lethal and unmeaningful strategy, because this would result, I can assure you by all means, what is appearing at the moment is that this may get out of hand sometime.
The very, very dangerous situation
It's a grave
developing,
situation,
sir.
yes.
Yasir Saab, if you just look at 2018, that's barely not even been a month, we have 70 ceasefire violations on the LOC and the working boundary just in 2018. And if we look at the figures from 2017, 832 people have been killed. 3,000 have been injured. 3,300 houses, 33,000 houses rather, have been destroyed as a result of mortar shelling by the Indians in 2017. But just look at the figure for 2018. In the month is not even over yet.
That's right.
70 violations, that's unheard of. It's uncalled for. And what we've done is just called the Indian High Commission and complained 1,000 times. What's the next step, sir? What can we do?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Because it's an important question, I would say. It's a pivotal question in the sense that, we have been taking this for as you just mentioned, that even you mentioned the figure of last year, and at the dawn of this new 2018, we just received, in the month is not over yet, and plus 70, as you just mentioned, that cross-border violations from the Indian side. There are two important perspectives, I would say. One is diplomatic means, and the other one is the military means. On the militarily, we have been responding them, and we have been responding them exactly the same into their language, exactly the same way we have been responding them. But on the diplomatic front, we are more active, and that's, I think, so the softer thing. That's, I think, the mature nations do, because diplomatically we are in ties with them, and time and again we have been saying to them that, look, this is against the civilians. Our civilians are being killed every day. Our innocents are being killed every day, and the houses are being killed. And these people are not, these are not fighters. These are not from the military. These are just common people, civilian people living peacefully, both sides of the border. So if Pakistan does the same, because military believes, one point of view is that military believes that they are not going to do this until and unless it occurs from them. So always India initiates and then Pakistan has to respond. India initiates and then we have to respond to them. Then when we talk about that what is the next stage, what is the next level, how we can go about, it's hard for us to go about it like this, and for how long? I would say that this current impasse between India and Pakistan, diplomatic means must be used. Dialogue must be rekindled between both countries, and both countries need to sit together. But unfortunately, since the reign of power is in the BJP's hand since 2013, we see this kind of jingoism, this kind of extremism is occurring every now and then, whether it is in the military, whether it is in the government, whether it's in the civilian side, whether it's in the common people from India. So this is very unfortunate, I would say, because the mammoth democracy of the world, the secular face of India which they claim, the shining India which they claim. I mean, these slogans are shallow. Look what they are doing to the next neighbor. And you know, we have
not to mention what they're doing to their own people in the form
Exactly.
of the Dalits and the castes, lower caste
Absolutely.
people. They, even the minorities within India are no longer safe. So India has become a Hindu fascist state, as we have seen many others turn into.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let's talk about the statement by the Indian general, sir. Now, he happens to say that he would be ready to call Pakistan's nuclear bluff. And, you know, that is, as we see these violations of the line of control continuing and increasing day by day, there is a connection between the statement and the actions on the LOC. Now, how do you think the Pakistan military and the Pakistani government should respond to this particular statement by the Indian Army chief? We have had a response from the DGISPR and so on and so forth, but do you think that's enough? Because he also called him out for being an irresponsible general. And we also had a response from China also saying that it's not helping. So, Ather Saab, please, what's your opinion on the situation?
First of
And
all,
what should be the real attitude of somebody sitting on a seat as strong as the Indian Army general?
I tell you, first of all, when I heard this, I was really laughing, because that looked to me that it is the most preposterous statement I have ever heard from any military leader in the world. Even Kim Il, the North Korean leader, when he assaults American leadership with his different tones and, tweets or whatever you call them, statements, it has a strong, layers under it. It has a bearing of it. It has some facts underneath it. The gentleman, I think, the chief of the army staff, he must have been embarrassed, and he must have embarrassed his own people who picked him up, chose him. It appears to me like he was maybe out of merit he was picked up, because if you remember, there was a controversy before he became the chief of army staff. So first of all, to me, on the lighter note, it was preposterous. Secondly, had this been the case, military leadership and the strategic military minds sit together, closed door, and deliberated. You do not reflect in your statements, especially to your opposition. And I think the bluff is the deception which India created by its cold start doctrine. Right. That is a bluff. And that was bluff. First they lied about it, then they admitted. When we raised exactly the full spectrum, then they were bewildered and evaporated. I never heard a statement until this one. And this also was not in the line of their own, that so-called, because Pakistan is among those countries, as we know, the one which, like Pentagon and other countries, the major countries who have a centrally designed strategic plans division, controlling of the arsenals and monitoring and its control. India doesn't have that. When India doesn't have that kind of thing, so the way Indian Army chief spoke means that actually it was, if I look into critical discourse really inside what textual context, it means it is quite possible that India must have been bluffing with her own self. Pakistan, on the other hand, takes this capability as a deterrence capability, not in terms of
offensive.
We do talk about the second strike capability, which we possess,
yes,
after having a Babar cruise and all these other components. But the most important thing which I would say in this regard is, which we all have to remember, that Pakistan's case in point has been the spectacular in terms of its impeccable record of safety and security.
Absolutely.
And Indian, on the contrary.
And it's recognized all over the world, sir.
International Atomic Energy Commission's chairman, when he visited in 2016, he visited our Center for Excellence in close to Chakri, in which he said that I would encourage all other countries to come and get a training here at the Center for Excellence, simply because of Pakistan's sheer capabilities of the training they're sharing, and on the ground, the knowledge they have, expertise they have, and also they have, this all happened after enduring all type of sanctions from the world. So the indigenousness which we possess, cannot be possibly compromised because of this kind of, I would say, really uncalled for and non-serious statements. I could use other words but we respect even our enemies' leadership. So, but I think non-seriousness, preposterous would be appropriate expressions for him, because he was also given a sand rub at home. Their own serious newspaper wrote about him, that how can he say that? But the best statement I heard is also from our foreign minister, I think one of the best statements, that okay, then why don't you try it? That will clear everything.
Yes, but that's
because
not an
if
option.
had this been, of course we are not saying that. I'm just saying that had this been a leader of the so-called democracy of the world and the so-called emerging power in front of China, not us, it means that they really need to look into their leadership. Because next time they select or bring somebody, he should be on merit. It appears to me that he was not selected on the merit. Otherwise, I have never heard, even from the previous leadership, saying all these kind of things. They do compete in our discourse, contest our course, that's fine. But saying, going to that limit mean that he forgot that psychological warfare or psyop, never discount the facts.
Absolutely.
If you discount the facts, that means you're shooting your own foot.
Well, Yasir, one thing that has come out quite clearly is the irresponsibility shown by the Indian military government. Also the fact that India is an irresponsible nuclear state. Why is this fact lost upon the Western powers that are propping India up to be a hegemon in the region? Why do they not see that it could create a really dangerous situation, not just for Pakistan, but for the entire world, if the Indians continue on the tangent that they are continuing on by pressuring Pakistan through the line of control and then also meddling in Pakistan's internal security via the Western side with their nexus between the NDS and RAW, and then creating and sowing chaos in Pakistan, as you saw the case of Yadav. So how do you think we should deal with this particular problem, irritant, and how do we talk about it diplomatically? Because if you really look at it, Pakistan is heading towards an election in this year, and then the next year the Indians would be in the election. So under those circumstances, it seems highly unlikely that there can be any diplomatic breakthrough between the two countries, because they'll be both busy. So what's your reading of the situation?
Waqas, to me, I would like to add one thing to to Ather Saab, that it was rather more delusional statement by the Chief of Army Staff of India. That's what I would say. And another thing is, even if we talk about the nuclear capability, and as we know that we have much more impeccable nuclear operators, nuclear capability that has been tried and tested many a times, which is evident to the whole world. But then your question is very important, that why things are the other way around when we see that internationally India is being much more recognized, India is being pampered a lot, and then India has been given lots of facilities and lots of promotions in that sense. And as you just mentioned in your question, that instead of that, I would say the worst thing is that instead of calling Indian nuclear capability that there are many loopholes in that, instead we are being blamed that it could be Pakistan's nuclear capability is much more fragile, because it could be Taliban's might take over and things like that, which is also an international rhetoric. So in that sense, I think so that India's nuclear capability is much more vulnerable and is much more dangerous for the whole region, especially when India is meddling in the affairs of its neighbors, forgetting about their near neighbors to whom India considers as the subordinate states. So, and as we know that India is pouring in huge money, huge funds in Pakistan to destabilize Pakistan through the soil of Afghanistan and from the eastern borders. So we are confronted with multifaceted challenges from both sides. Now the point is, how do we project ourselves? How do we need to build our narratives throughout the world? that we have such a nuclear capability, in spite, as my colleague just mentioned, that in spite of sanctions, we attained this. And then another thing is that we have much more sophisticated missile technology, much more advanced missile technology.
Yeah, but that begs the question, Yasir, about their cold start doctrine. Like, if India were to launch a preemptive attack on Pakistan, what options would Pakistan have? Because that is what really it amounts to. The Indians threatening Pakistan. First, they're violating the ceasefire agreement on the line of control, and now they're pressuring Pakistan from all sides. Now that is the real dilemma here. We'll come back to these questions, but right now we need to take a short break. When we return, we'll continue with this conversation. So just take a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back after the break. We were talking about the irresponsible remarks and statements of the Indian Chief of Army Staff. A very unfortunate statement emanating from such a serious person, one would expect, but unfortunate. But we also need to move on and see where Pakistan and United States relationship is heading, because all things are eventually connected. Sir, we're moving on to the next topic, which is the call that was received by the Chief of Army Staff by General Joseph L. Vattel, especially in the aftermath of the tweet by POTUS. So General Vattel, sir, told the Chief of Army Staff that the US values Pakistan's role in the so-called war on terror, and that recent turbulence in the two countries' relationship remains a temporary phase, and hopefully it shall be smoothed out, and the feathers that have been ruffled will be again smoothed out, and things will go back on track hopefully very soon. What's your analysis of this particular move by the American general to reach out to the Pakistanis?
I think it's very normal to me. They call, they must have called. And if the General Joseph called, well, that is even better. That means it shows that they themselves are also uncomfortable, and they're not interested privately. And there are many stories published in New Yorker and other magazines and the newspapers, international newspaper, Washington Post included, that it is not the right way. The President Trump and his team is told that this is not the right way to treat Pakistan, not because the Pakistan is a so-called friend of the United States, but also Pakistan is a nuclear power and a major nation to reckon with in the region. And Pakistan, as Pakistan Chief of Army Staff stated, General Bajwa, that because of this language of the tweet, actually Pakistani nation felt deceived,
Absolutely.
betrayed by the United States.
Absolutely.
And General Joseph basically wanted to say that, look, our hands are tied up. We apologize implicitly. That this remains, when you say temporarily, it doesn't mean direct apology. It means that, we are confused. And that's what the US is. Because whatever happened in Afghanistan is not Pakistan's fault. They must talk to Afghan government and they must ensure the political process is initiated timely, reconciliation and negotiation. And I heard there was a meeting between Taliban and Afghan government.
In Istanbul.
It's in Istanbul, in Turkey. So that thing is on. The Qatar process is also on. Sometimes they change the places. It's the same process. So until and unless the United States creates conducive environment to initiate a process of negotiation, so there would be a mileage, extra mileage for the US to show something to their public. It would never be helpful. They have tried their best to pressurize us withdrawing this $1 billion security aid, on the basis of which Pakistan replied to General Joseph, and he conveyed back home there to his president, his bosses, that this is what the Pakistan wants. Pakistan is not interested in the aid. Pakistan is really interested to US to respect Pakistan's stature and the conditions. Pakistan will never give in into threats and the stalling process, because what happens is that they put everything in the back burner. Pakistan's major issue with India, Kashmir issue. Most importantly, they have disregarded all the international, the other organizations have been reporting that what is going on inside Kashmir, that brutality of Indian forces not only was disregarded, ignored, that also showed that a superpower cannot remain a superpower until they are neutral. When a superpower takes sides, then it becomes blocks, like we had it before the Cold War, that we have Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. At the moment, what I'm looking at is a new international security regime is being established through Russia, Pakistan, China, and might be Turkey, and maybe in Iran. But I know that these things are in process.
It seems to be that that is the only logical way
That is the only logical. This is not in competition with the United States. This is an alternative to the existing troubles which US facing in different parts of the world. Because when US initiated wars from Afghanistan and went back to Iraq, and then moved back into Afghanistan, and then to Syria and Libya, the shuttle process, this war shuttling, basically managed to deplete US credibility. That why US is moving back and forth into different Muslim countries and then encouraging other Muslim countries to attack another Muslim country. That has created that complete a disconnect and a wedge between the international security regimes. Therefore, it's logical to have this kind of emergence.
Absolutely.
What happened after the Second World War? Prior to the First World War, exactly the other powers took, a position. They positioned themselves in a way in which they can operate and they can serve the need of conflict management. US at the moment is in paralysis of domestic and international policies. That's what my assessment is.
I think that's a very good assessment, sir. I would agree with it to a large extent. Let's also talk about another statement about the unilateral action that the US threatened. Another thing that was conveyed to the Chief of Army Staff is that the US is not contemplating any unilateral action against or inside Pakistan, but they do feel that those who are using Pakistan's soil to launch attacks in Afghanistan is undermining Pakistan's contributions in the war. That is also the thought process that was articulated by General Votel. How do you see that? Do you think that Pakistan is undermining its contributions in the war because some parts of its territory might be used by some Afghans that are living in the borderlands where there is no Afghan writ of the government? What are we supposed to do about that?
First thing first, that I think Pakistani military personnel, and since we started to have a go against extremism and terrorism, we have unprecedented challenges we had, but then we had number of successes. And if we see our security operators, it has proved to the whole world now that the way we went on with all this extremism, terrorism, I think so that Pakistan has done so well, and this is an example for the whole world. And US also realizes this. Keep that in mind, that US knows a lot. You know, they are completely aware that what Pakistan has been up to and how Pakistan went about it up till now. Now this rhetoric is it's a recurrent theme, as we see that at times it's come from the Trump, from the US administration, that Pakistan is undermining, there are sanctuaries inside Pakistan, Pakistan is responsible for the mess in Afghanistan. So one way or the other they are making Pakistan as a scapegoat. Now when we talk about that, when we had go against extremism and terrorism, you know, we had number of successes, but at the same time it's a long war. It's a kind of you know, we also need to play with the mindset, we need to work on that. So there might be some pockets where there are still some you know, terror outfits are still there, but by few outfits of terrorists we cannot say that Pakistan is undermining its own image. In fact, Pakistan has been facilitating Afghanistan as well, because we have been clearing from our side, from this side of the border. I think Pakistan is more victim now. And then another important aspect is that we are much more concerned about peace in Afghanistan. Yes, that's absolutely fine, we should be, because we are a natural neighbor with Afghanistan. But at this particular time, at this particular moment, Pakistan is in a much more vulnerable state of mind, because you see there are lots of statements emanating from the US that Pakistan, it's just like the pressure tactics. US is using these pressure tactics against Pakistan, and just because of its fiascos and its failures in Afghanistan, what they could not achieve. So they are making Pakistan as a scapegoat.
So you're saying that they're playing good cop, bad cop with Pakistan, being General Votel being the good cop and of course POTUS being the bad cop in the situation. Do you agree with that, sir?
I would not agree with that, unfortunately, because of the US has shown its colors. US clearly said to us, and the highest from the highest pedestal of their power, when the president of US speaks, everybody speaks behind it. I don't consider President Trump was doing a knee-jerk or impulsive. I think this was planned already. This has been cooked long time ago. They were taking step by step in order to you know, look into Pakistani, how Pakistan reacts and what will happen, how Pakistan in the negotiation table. Since Pakistan would not negotiate from the position of weakness, that is one lesson Pakistan has learned while they have been fighting in the past US wars. They were Obama's war, but actually it is not about President Trump. It is the system inside the US which is being opposed by Democrats and you know, impartial Republicans. You know, they have been saying it all along that the most important job was at home on healthcare and other issues, and also the losses, the lives they lost during all these unwarranted wars. So Pakistan will not actually take any tension on the basis that the US decides one single morning to accuse Pakistan and threaten it. We will not take threats from United States or any other country. It will never happen anymore because of the simple situation. Threats come with the perception. And if US perception is that Pakistan will feel vulnerable, is absolutely wrong. Pakistan is the only country in this region which can really create and help US to restore its international image as a superpower. Other countries can use US to forward their agendas, like India is doing in Afghanistan, or other Western countries are using US power, might, aerial intelligence in Syria. But the defeat of the US wisdom, especially the war wisdom, which they claim that it will occur and reoccur, is not because of Pakistan, is because of their inconsistent policies and a bad intelligence, wrong intelligence, which they forward to share with their allied countries. So Pakistan is in a perfect position. It's not vulnerable at all. It's in a perfect position to tell the United States that enough is enough. If you consider us friends, we will show you as a friend that we will do our homework and you do yours. We cannot fight Afghan Taliban on Afghan soil or any other soil just because the United States has failed and the Afghan government to create a political process through which they have already inducted Gulbuddin Hikmatyar, Hizb Islami. They can present the same model and make constitutional changes. But it should be for Afghanistan to decide. We as Pakistanis want an Afghan-led and Afghan-owned, when we say that exactly mean minus US aspirations, minus the so-called democratic imposition on a country which is not used to it. Look what happens actually in most of the areas. There are countless examples where the United States has built outside the red zone few things, and for the public, they demolish it, they build the way they want it. Same goes for the training of the army. US wants to train them like the Navy SEALs. Well, a nation, when the professional armies take hundreds of years to become decades, you cannot impose a foreign solution on a national army which never existed. You have to create those environments. For that environment to be created, they need a balanced, ethnically composite government which addresses the entire population. Well, then again, this must be decided by Afghanistan, not by the US. So if US is posing as a face of Afghanistan, they should take a back seat, allow Afghanistan and Afghan government to operate independently and prevent India not to influence entire Afghan government. Entire institutions are riddled with advisors from India. That will never let, because they don't want peace in Afghanistan, so they have the excuse to blame again, to carry out that blame game of Pakistan and trying to create a situation where US takes action against Pakistan. So the job which India wants to do from the eastern side, they want US to conduct that position from the western border. But we will defend both our borders because we are not warmongering. We are in a defensive state.
Absolutely. And if we just read further between the lines of the conversation that took place between the Chief of Army Staff of Pakistan and the American general, as well as the American senator who also called the Chief of Army Staff, it was understood in the conversations that Pakistan will keep supporting the initiative for peace in Afghanistan despite the American tendency of scapegoating Pakistan. Because peace in Afghanistan is the only way forward for us and for enduring peace and stability in the region. And it is very important for our own survival and existence. So it just boggles the mind, why would Pakistan be blamed for American failures in Afghanistan? Well, having said that, the general also acknowledged the effectiveness of Pakistan's operations when it comes to dealing with the threats that are emanating, and the hospitality that Pakistanis have shown to the Afghans for the past 3 decades or even more. And finally, the bottom line of that conversation was that both countries stand to gain from cooperation and engagement rather than taking opposing stands or trying to point fingers at each other. Would you agree with this analysis and this statement eventually? Ather Saab, do you think this is the way to go forward?
Absolutely.
There's no other way.
There is no other way because of the the contextual analysis. What you're asking is, have very simple to obvious, implementing point. One is the US must understand from all directions that this is the way that if US treats Pakistan as a friendly state and not non-member NATO state, then there are so many things to gain for US. If US do not adhere to what it's been stating all these 4 or 5 decades about us, about Pakistan, then US is the one has to lose, not us, because we exist here for 70 years, and inshallah we will exist, indefinitely. The US can go out from this region again after all the war and destruction we are not going anywhere. This must be realized by Afghans, and this must be realized by Russia, China, and Iran and other regional countries, so that, and also India, by the way.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and I wanted to ask Yasir this question about the statement that emanated from the Indian general. We had a very strong reaction coming from China and other countries that have a keen eye and understanding of what's happening in the region. We had no sounds coming out of the US or the Western powers that be, whether it was Britain. A statement like that should have been snubbed by the heads of government from all countries, saying that, are you insane? Are you mad? What kind of a statement are you making? I mean, you're provoking another country who is a nuclear-armed neighbor, and you are trying to push them against the wall. Is that a sane thing to do?
Well, it's the same thing to do, and I think so. If you're talking about US, same kind of sane tweets are coming from there as well. So it reflects that there is some sort of influence on India as well, because of the love affair which has been developed by India and the US. But yes, logically speaking, it's no less than a lunatic statement coming from the chief of army staff of a country, and it boggles our mind, and then it is ridiculous that how irresponsible statement is emanating from the biggest democracy, as we mentioned. So I believe that we had a proper response, we had a belligerent response, and then both Foreign Office and the statement from the military, it was one statement that it is an immature statement, and it is a statement which is emanating from the Indian side of Pakistan is ready for any confrontation, although it's a far-fetched sort of concept that if there would be a nuclear warfare between both countries. Now, coming back to your question that what is happening inside Afghanistan, coming back to US, I would say that 16 years on in Afghanistan, there is a kind of, they could not achieve what they wanted to. The only solution is the political solution, and it must be given in the hands of the Afghani people. As you mentioned in your question that China and Russia and they have a keen eye, and they came up with stance against India, against this statement. I see that this is in this multipolar world order, this is another bloc which has emerged in this region.
And just to put it briefly, don't you think that this statement by General Rawat amounts to an invitation for a nuclear war or a nuclear encounter?
See,
isn't that what it is?
Nuclear capacity or nuclear capability is for the purpose of deterrence and defense, and it is for the purpose of defense. Rather, it is only used for the purpose of deterrence as well. But then it is, an invitation, and how irresponsible, knowing the fact that what could be the, consequences of this kind of statement, and what kind of this statement India is representing itself to the whole world, exposing itself to the whole world, that look, this is what we are.
And
in reality.
I think other countries, especially in the United Nations, should take a very serious note and notice of this particular statement by General Rawat, and it should be discussed threadbare in the United Nations that can such statements be allowed to be made on public forums?
Absolutely.
I think that is where we leave it. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for taking out the time and being on the show and sharing your views with PTV World. Well, it's time to say goodbye, but eventually, one thing that we must say is about the tragedy of Zainab, and there are countless many other Zainabs that are reported in the press or have been reported in the press in this country for the past many years, and nothing has come of them either. So we hope that this society would wake up and smell the coffee and see in which direction we are headed. We must put those who are criminals behind bars, and we must punish those who deserve their punishment rather than create laws and protect them with those same laws. And that is where the buck stops. I think we need serious reforms in our police, in our judicial system, so that the perpetrators of crimes can be punished. With that hope and on that note, it's goodbye.